Hey everyone, it's Vanessa Callahan, and I'm so excited to welcome you to the Calm, Empowered Parent podcast. Together, let's challenge the idea that parenting has to be perfect. We know that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to raising children, and while love is the key, it sure helps to have the right tools for the job. Raising resilient humans is intensely personal and even transformative work, and I'm here for it. Let's laugh, cry, heal, and learn together. Here we go. All right, welcome everybody. So good to have you here. And I'm so lucky to have Sarah Kowalski here. She is an esteemed client, but also an accomplished coach, mentor, and author, really focusing her work on supporting single moms by choice. She's the author of Motherhood Reimagined and also the leader and head coach at Mother Reimagined. You can find her on Instagram. And we're just so glad to have you here because you've been on quite a Shiro's journey in your parenting, and it's not over. You're still in the journey. But when we get to a certain place in our work together, you've had multiple breakthroughs, and you really are on a new page for your family.
Mhm.
And I'm just so interested in pulling some insights like we do here in the Raising Resilience world from your experience, so that perhaps folks who are in the midst of it can have a compass and some ideas about what steps to take next that might help them to also overcome struggles. So we're going to go into a piece that is really like recounting something that was hard and challenging, Sarah, but it's for the benefit for the communities. So thank you for being willing to just exercise with us. And
Yeah.
folks, stay tuned too, because we'll also see what's new and fresh and exciting in Sarah's world and where she might want some support today, so you can benefit from some live coaching as well. So Sarah, but take us back to when we were first getting in touch. I know a friend of yours recommended me to you, a previous client of mine, because you were really going through a tough time, many, was it 3 years ago now? So
Yeah, it's crazy
walk
to
us through that a little bit. Like what was happening?
Sure.
What were you
Yeah.
up against? Yeah.
Yeah, so it was still kind of the thick of the pandemic. My mom had just died, one of our dogs had just died. We had been living in Mexico in, like, an inland, like, colonial mountain town, and I moved us to the beach kind of short term because I was
Yeah.
like, "I think I can handle the pandemic if we could get to the beach every day," so we did that, and my kid I have an insight now from what you gave me as to why, but he suddenly got really violent with me and so angry and was, like, hitting me, threatening me. He would just, like, come up. I remember I was, like, sitting on, like, a bench, and there was, like, a window behind me, and he was on the other side of the open window, and he just, like, reached through and, like, hit me on the head and just, like, verbally really mean, and it was horrible. It was probably the low point of my life. So
And
I
just to get
so
like a paint a picture, like about how old was he at that time?
he must have been 6 or 6 and
Yeah,
a
that's
half.
what I remember too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that there were feelings that came up around trying to find a way through it. I mean, you were trying things. It wasn't that you weren't trying things. You were trying to state your boundaries and tell him that it's not okay to hit and fill the day with enjoyable activities. Like I just remember you saying, like, I'm trying, Vanessa,
Yeah.
and but it's not
Yeah.
working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had, been always listening and reading parenting books and podcasts and that kind of thing. So I felt like I knew what I was supposed to be doing. And I was like, none of this is working. So trying to, empathize and hold clear boundaries, that kind of thing. And it just wasn't, it was just continuing to escalate. It was bizarre.
Well, it's also like to your credit, I mean, we all have, unless we have decades of experience with children, like someone like me or my coaches and other folks out there who've kind of seen it all and worked through it all and have all these insights from after looking back. Like this was your first experience raising is not only a 6-year-old, but your particular 6-year old.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to to sort through and understand about what each child needs from us when they start to do things like what they're trying to communicate, and everything. So when you came to me, I thought of like, wow, this is a mom who's really trying her best, but there's like the tools and strategies weren't just like not quite the right fit for what was needed at the moment, but not for any fault of yours. I mean, you were really, that was all you were focusing on, really. I mean, you had moved your family to Mexico to make things more easeful, so you had more time to spend with him. You went to the beach thinking this is a great way to relieve some of the pressure of the pandemic. So just want to preface this by saying like how much I saw your big heart and your dedication and your, desperation and like feeling hopeless and helpless all mashed together in this. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially from someone so accomplished. I mean, went to law school, a lawyer for many years, owning multiple properties, like authoring a book, starting a whole community. I mean, you're an incredibly capable person. So I think this contrast can be especially hard on those of us who are highly capable in other areas of our lives. We're like, why is this falling apart?
Yeah. Yeah, and had studied tons of, like, social emotional, like, how should we be working with our kids? So it felt very like, "Wait a minute, I totally thought I knew what I was doing, and it was not working."
So good on you to kind of like wave the flag in a way. And I just want to normalize this for so many people. That I'm on a mission to make it even like a welcome and beneficial, acceptable for parents to wave the flag and go, you know what, I need some support here, whether it's at this point or early on in getting to know your kids and what they need. And just good on you for waving the flag and finding the support. So to the benefit of, I mean, I know what I counseled you on and how we work through it, but bring us back to what you did that started to make a difference, because you did experience improvement over a pretty short period of time, which I
Yeah.
know really set with you. And then there was a whole lot more for us to work on, of course, because that's how it works with dynamic kids and dynamic families. But walk us through the
Yeah.
first
The 3
change.
things that I remember that were pretty distinct, that
Yeah,
one was not to engage with him while he was in sort of a fit or whatever, feeling like threatening and being violent, and so you told me to, like, very calmly get to, like, a bathroom or a closet or whatever that I could get myself into so that he couldn't engage with me, and then give him the choice. So, like, I will come out when you choose to calm down, but, like, it's your choice. If you would like, you can choose when I come out by when you choose to calm down, which is a strategy differently associated now, but, like, constant now that I figure out how to put everything into that kind of choice where it's like he's getting the autonomy and the choice to make a good choice. And that was, I think, the very first thing that I did that you told me, like, during our it was even during our, sort of intro call to see whether we were gonna work together, and I was like, "Whoa," it worked in 2 times, and it stopped. It was, like, crazy. So, like
well,
so
crazy that although we understand the science behind it more now, but I just like, yeah, it's like, wait, this one thing, really? I had parents on a call recently who were just sharing why the work has been so meaningful to them, and they said in one phone call, everything changed. They went from a 3-hour bedtime to a 20-minute bedtime, and it just
yeah,
like radically changed their daily life. So sometimes it can be this just like this one piece that, when we find it, we
yeah.
place it there, can really shift the dynamic. So you started to feel that, I
Yeah.
remember.
So that was pretty immediate, and then the other thing was giving him, like, what that special time, like, no phone, him leading the play, letting him know I was there for him, and sort of letting him know, like, "Every day we're gonna have this time. It's gonna be this long. You get to do everything," and so that he knew he had that, like, really direct connection with me. Busy lives, easy to constantly be like, "Oh, hang on, what did you say? I gotta check my phone." So that was the other piece, and then the third piece was you identified pretty clearly, like, where he that there was a moment that he seemed as though was, like, the wrong that he was mad at me for,
Yeah.
and that was that we I had moved us to this beach town, but I told him it was temporary, but in my mind, I was exploring whether we might stay long term, and we went to go look at a school, but it looked like we were just going to, like, their Christmas party. But at the party, I started asking the teacher about what it would look like if he went to school there, and he heard me
Yeah.
talking about going to the school, and he
Right.
was in that moment, he was like, "What? Like, I thought we were moving back. Like, why are you talking to her about a school?" And he ran into me and, like, barreled his body into me. And so that made and you identified, like, I think that's the hurt that he's mad about, and you need to do, like, repair around this piece and really let him feel heard and do, like, formal repair with him. And that was the other piece that it was again, you were, like, totally spot on that that was the thing that out of many things that I probably could have named, that really was the thing that he was really angry about and was, like, the source
Right.
of him feeling betrayed.
And in the context of the work we do together, right, we have these like 7 pillars of raising resilient kids. Like that's a framework I keep pulling from that has really served so many families. Like we're working on the positive relationship pillar with like that outside of the moment, really build that relationship. Put credit into the relationship piggy bank, right? Like make sure you have that special time.
Mhm.
And then we're also looking at any kind of conflict resolution and repair. And when I heard, and this is for anybody who sees this, if your child is lashing out at you a lot and it seems out of context or it seems much bigger than the offense, right? Sort of like, you didn't cut my sandwich, and they throw the sandwich, right? So there's many things that could be going on there. But what I started to hear from your story was that, he had this reaction, like what they call the mistaken goals of behavior from Rudolf Dreicher's work of revenge, which is when you feel hurt, you want to hurt others. And so I was like, well, if we can get to the root of it. So here we're like taking care of the relationship, trying to find the root and try to like take care of that and like heal what was harmed or broken there, which I know no intention of yours, but it happened. You kind of heal that rift. And then also have strategies in the moment to do a couple of things, which is to give those boundaries, because the physical boundary of the door helped him to not have access to your body to continue the cycle of harming you and getting a reaction and harming and getting a reaction. And then the last one was like some form of emotion coaching and motivation. So we touched on like 5 of the 7 pillars. Because that autonomy motivates, it's like, oh, now it's on me. Like I'm going to sort it out, figure it out. Emotional coaching in the sense that you're like, you believed in him, that he could pull it together and be done hitting, find a way to soothe himself. And then when you open that door, he really will be back in control. And since then, we've also worked on all of these pieces to further his development and help him mature into the boy he is today. So I commend you for being so receptive to multiple strategies in a short amount of time. Is something that's one of Sarah's strengths, also not only as a client but also as a coach. She's like, well, let's make sure we check all the angles and go at it like a comprehensive approach. And that's what you wanted, and so that's what we did. And I'm so proud of you for it, and continue to
Yeah.
be. So where you're standing today, now that you've walked through that period of time, I know you had several other very very challenging times. Like looking back, like what would you say has been a standout in like how not only has this work built your relationship with your son, but also like how has it served you as sort of a vehicle for personal growth? And I'm going to go ahead and put my little thing in there, what I would say with folks, which is practically a tagline at this point. It's like having a child is possibly the most personalized and accelerated program for personal growth on the planet. So if you love this child with all your being, and they're going to find ways to find all the areas that you still need to grow in, whether it's patience or resilience or fortitude, being strength and being able to create boundaries, whatever it might be. So
Wow.
I know Sarah, like you and I have reflected a lot of this about this in the second and third year that we work together, especially with the community in the leadership level. What would you say are some standout takeaways for you about building a relationship with your son and about how you've grown in the process?
It's been my own everything, like recognizing that he is mirroring a lot of my nervous system state as sort of like a baseline with just the research we know about mirror neurons and limbic systems. So, sort of looking always like having the strategies, but also like, what is my part?
Mm,
And, like, I'm not good at I feel like I'm not so good at setting boundaries, like, I look at
mm,
like, I had all these dogs that I, like, half train, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, fine, I'll just let them on the bed," and then, like, with a kid, you can't it's like that little, like, if my kid notices that little window of opportunity, he's gonna go all the way with that, he's gonna find my holes and my boundaries, so I have to be super crystal clear, and sometimes it's not fun to hold those boundaries, and sometimes it means canceling a play date that you really wanted to go on as well for yourself, but you're like, "I set this boundary, so now I have to live through it." So I think that is it's a hard one. He has a hot temper, he's quick to anger, and so am I, funny enough, right? So all of those pieces, like when you teach the emotion coaching, so it's like I'm trying to get him to calm down, but I'm doing it for myself, and truly I need it for myself as well, right? So that's a big one. And then just in general, is trying to look at like what are the like I'm was just doing a session with my therapist around like, oh, like my kid tends to be quite oppositional, and that is basically how I survived my mother was being really feisty and oppositional against someone who was a little bit difficult to deal with. So just like it's like it's always coming back to me as well as also giving him tools
Yeah.
but it's a constant practice.
Yeah. And your willingness, again, I mean, just keep talking about your willingness to reflect, self reflect and see what's there. I think I also want to put a plug for this doing this work in the sense that it's also more effective. So if let's say you really want your kid to listen better and you really want your kid to deal with their feelings, their big emotions better, and you said to come to me, Vanessa, like what tricks do you have? Like, should I bribe them with this or should I? But I said, well, we can do that. There's some things we can do there. I said, but we also need to really look at what are you modeling
Mhm.
because that's going to have even an even bigger impact. Because if you're modeling one thing and then asking them to do something very different, that mixed message will give you mixed results and will take a lot more effort to kind of muscle through. And then you might end up having to do things like escalate to taking
Mm,
things away and being more authoritarian, angry and sort of domineering in order to make things happen. So I say beware what works too quickly, especially if there's any fear or anger involved. So if we're
mm,
not going to go into that zone, we're like, we don't want to be that kind of parent. We also don't want to be a parent that gets trampled on and just like lets everything slide. And then the kid is really hard to rein in. We're going for that authoritative support and demand, warm, wise parenting kind of zone of blending the two of support and demand. Then we're going to need to really take a look at how we model to the child. But and I keep saying, yeah, and it's also just strategically better. They really do catch our lead, and follow our lead. They'll emulate us and not perfectly, but over time, it has the biggest impact. And I've seen this work over and over again. So again,
yeah,
can I
I
commend you
can
for
think
being
of
willing.
yeah, and I can think of, like, a few models you've given me that, like, if I like, sometimes there'll be, like, a list of 3 questions or, like, whatever, and if I pretend that I'm doing it for myself, I can explicitly tell him, like, "Hey, when you're feeling this way, you should ask yourself blah, blah, blah." Or I can be like, "Oh, I wonder if" and sort of do it out loud either for myself or for him, and that is by far the most effective for him, like, he learns. But if I try and, like, directly teach him, he's like, "Oh, please." So I think it's yeah, it's so true that the modeling and he oftentimes it takes me modeling it once, maybe twice, and then he adopts it.
Which is kind of wild, but also wise, like how humans are built, like social learning. Like they're gonna learn a lot more by what they see demonstrated, what they've tried, what they have experience with, than just what they're told. And I
Mhm.
think that's actually it's pretty smart in a lot of ways, right?
Mm.
Like
Yeah,
what are people actually doing to survive or to thrive or to connect or to solve problems or to feel better versus what they say they're doing. A good life skill.
right,
What are they actually doing?
right.
Yeah, no wonder we're hardwired this way as well to be like these social learners is what I'd call it, right? So we're not just programming our children, we're actually creating a social environment within which they can absorb clues. And because that's really how we're built. I mean, how many times have you heard a kid, like a phrase fall out of a kid's face that they've never used or tried on before, but they place it exactly. Like I remember like a 3.5-year-old stubbing their toe in the classroom and going, gosh darn it all. I was like, that is cute. But also, where did that come from?
Mhm, mhm.
And I went back to the parents and I said, I'm just curious, did your child spend time with anybody who does this? They said, oh, grandpa, all the way. And I said, well, how much
Oh,
time did they spend with him? So only a day. And I was
oh
like,
my
so within a day, this child learned like when you do something by accident to harm yourself, you say something like you say, gosh darn it all. And then within, 48 hours was already doing it spontaneously without, thinking about it. I'm like that's a quick
true.
absorption and learning. Yeah. Like a learning moment. So wonderful. So modeling how you work with yourself. And I like what you're emphasizing about boundaries. That can be a long journey and
Mhm,
finding your way to kind and firm at the same time. So I guess with all of this in mind, if you can go back to the time when you were at your lowest, you just said, oh, like that moment of getting hit in the head through the window by your son, which we can all imagine just sitting on the couch and suddenly you're getting attacked by your own child. It's just an awful moment. But if you could like time travel there in some sort of like guardian angel version of yourself or, future Sarah, hey,
uh-huh.
future Sarah's here. And I want to tell you something from the other side of all of this, speed forward a few years. What are a couple of, and then I'm going to ask all my guests this, if you
Mhm,
whisper something into your own ear, what would
mhm.
you say to yourself?
Well, one, I think it's gonna be okay, it's gonna get better, and that there are specific strategies that, if applied correctly or, like, the right tool for the job, it's gonna change actually quickly, and you're not gonna be stuck in this forever. And that it's okay, like, support, you need your team. Like, you can't figure this out on your own. So I think that team piece, so I feel like I'm so well supported now. And oftentimes, actually, in talking to, like, single moms by choice who are trying to decide, they're like, "What if I'm going through a really hard time with my kid and my kid says they hate me or I feel like I'm doing it wrong?" And I'm like, "That's when you call and you get support, and you don't do this alone because there's ways through all of it." There's going to be low moments, but having a really, yeah, a good team makes a big difference.
Many folks have reflected on how, we used to, in some historical contexts, we used to have more of that village context of raising children and just being able to weather storms and pull on resources and have fresh eyes. And, there's just more when there's more people there, more resources and insights. In modern times, we're often needing to rebuild that or recreate it in our current context. And what's nice about things like, the program that you joined or the work that we've done together, the communities that you build for single moms by choice is that you don't have to actually do it completely from scratch, particularly because you create communities. When you came into touch with the model that I work with, which is very has that community feel, you recognized it immediately. You're like, ooh, Insta Village. I mean, you still have to put work in, to connect with people and show up. But it's that feeling, and I also remember, and I'm curious if you would even have a message for yourself back then around, like, reassuring yourself about that support and how you would feel once you dropped into the container of support. Like, how would you describe to your past self the feeling of plugging in and connecting with support that's available?
I mean, I guess not hopeless, right? That there's one that's like normalized, that many other people are experiencing similar things, and that just like a feeling of being held, it's like landing in a big soft cushion, right?
Yeah, I love that, and what it feels like to me, like you're, like, less burdened, right? You're, like, carrying it all on your own. You get to unravel yourself a bit. Unwind
Mhm,
yourself a bit and relax in that big cushion and sink into it. I think there's a sinking too. There's like a I'm held
mhm,
feeling.
mhm. Yeah.
Oh. And like floating around like an erratic particle. Sometimes how it feels, I think, when I feel unsupported. You're like, ah,
Totally.
where do I land? So excellent. I love that, Sarah. So let's shift to how I can support you today so folks can get a sense of the coaching and how we kind of uncover maybe some a core piece to pay attention to right now. I like to set these sort of 2-week goals with my clients, with folks in my world. And then, we really play it through and check back in. So let us know what I can support you with today. If there's any kind of challenge we can tackle, and folks can see how we kind of like get to maybe what, like you had those 3 things that you had back in the
Yeah.
day. What might be
Yeah.
up for you
Well,
now?
I mean, I
Yeah.
feel like things have calmed down so much.
Yeah.
Largely, I'm reporting, like, I don't really know what's going on right now, so that's really good. Um,
Yeah, to not have like, ooh, I've got like these 5 things. I need to pick one. And yeah,
yeah,
which
I'm like, I think there's like it's kind of more annoying rather than like crisis point, which I was at
yeah.
before. So it's like Aiden wakes up in the morning and he's like, "Mom, can we talk about what I'm gonna get for Christmas? Or can I have this? Can I have that? Like, can we go back to that place where we could get blah blah blah? And how many presents do you think Tasha and Grandpa are gonna get me? And blah blah." And then I'm like, "Can we not talk about this right now? Or we're not talking about presents?" Like constantly wanting something, and then if I purchase something, we've even made an agreement that it would mean he wouldn't ask for anything else for, like, a month, or there wouldn't be any more presents until Christmas, and we got that thing, we made the agreement, and now it's like, "Can we look up this thing that I want? Can we look up that thing that I want?" And it feels almost, like, habitual for him. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's a few things. It's like a habit, and it's that, like, nothing actually satisfies because he's, like, always seeking, like, this dopamine hit, but nothing seems to satisfy it, but I also feel like he does it to, like, almost, like, unground me, So
mm.
he knows that it's like he's poking and poking and poking until I'm like, "Ah."
A
So
dislodged erratic particle again? I'm just
yeah.
kidding.
Right.
Yeah,
So it's
ungrounding.
super annoying, and it often ends in me being like, "Ah, we're not talking about that stuff right now, like, you've got to stop asking me, like, we're just not getting any presents, ah!" Is kind of how it usually ends, is something like that. I was like, "I'm not
Yeah.
doing it, I've not had coffee, I am not
Mhm.
in a position to have this conversation right now," but it literally can sometimes be the first word out of like, he'll, like, wake up and be like, "Oh, Mom, can we talk about that thing I want?"
Yeah, so there's a few things here, like, there's his part, and then there's your part, and then there's sort of, like, the environment. So, let's start with the environment just to contextualize it for and everybody has different sort of context, but there's some overlap. I mean, it is unreal how much the, like, gift hype
Mhm,
starts so early in the year and is relentlessly in the environment, even if you homeschool and shelter from things and, have minimal contact with sort of commercials and things.
mhm,
It's in the environment. So, the assumption can be that he's gonna come into contact with
right,
gift-focused,
right,
messaging no matter what. So I think the one thing I always like to do with my clients is sort of set the goal, in baby steps. Like, what is our scaffold? So, I mean, our ultimate goal would be he'd wake up and not be thinking about presents. So we can talk about how to sort of reduce that. But it might be like half the days he thinks of it as a or like a little less, and then maybe half the days, and then only once, twice a week or something. And we may never even get up here. It might
it
just
doesn't
be
go
that
away when there's no
season goes.
Christmas to buy. It's
Yeah,
always I always want
right.
something.
I would say though it's amplified by Christmas, right? Potentially, like, yeah. I mean, at least in the environment, the reinforcement of it is
Yeah.
more intense. But I hear you that he tends to be focused on what do I get, what do I get, and the dopamine hit, right? So that we'll talk about that in a moment. But so in terms of the environment, I mean, you can give a heads up to your people that this is something you're working on. In a polite way, say, hey, just so you know, like Aiden's already thinking a lot about gifts, so we really don't even need to bring that up to him and ask him if he's excited about Christmas and his presents and what does he want. And like, if we can minimize that, that would be a huge favor to me. Like, just let your people know this is a project you're working on, and you love their support. And sometimes that can have an impact. So it's a worthwhile just putting it out there and seeing how that influences things. So that's just the context piece, the environment. Now let's talk about him. Is there anything from that that you wanted to reflect back before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, his break with his tutor often is, like, looking up stuff. That's, like, what he wants as his break. Like, he could pick
Mhm.
anything, and he picks to, like, look up stuff that he wants, which I'm not sure whether to interrupt that because he does need high motivation to work with the tutor. But I could
Yeah.
just be kind of aware that I'm trying to, like, tone down the
Yeah,
stuff.
and this is like a refining question, discerning question. Like, is this everybody, or is it? Do we need to just let
Right.
it go for certain? It's like choose your battles kind of strategy, right? So I would say, like, if there's a high stakes thing and it's working, leave it alone because it's I think the if we were to look at priorities, right?
Right.
Priority of him having a successful tutoring session as he's working through his academic, sort of achievement goals, which we're very, very invested in right
Mm,
now, right? So for him, versus, diminishing his exposure to gifts. I think,
right,
yeah.
right.
So good on you to like make that distinction. Yeah. So
Mhm,
that would be the exception.
mhm,
There might
mhm.
be more as you think it through.
Right.
Okay. So in a discerning way, let folks know that this is something we're trying to tone down, and you yourself, in the environment, your immediate environment of what you have control over, tone it
Mm,
down. Okay, so that's the first step. Now to him with these dopamine hits, it's a really good insight. And it is connected to some things we know about how brains work, and you have some specific insight into how he might be seeking dopamine hits. I do wonder about what it can look like to continue to investigate other sources of those dopamine hits with him, working with something that's already sort of in play. So when you think about the different ways that he gets dopamine hits across his day, I know that kinda coming back to that special time with you is definitely something he likes. He likes attention, and he likes you
mhm,
getting into his world and showing interest in what he's into.
Mhm.
And it's part of what you're withholding in the morning when he goes there is like the conversation. Like I don't want to talk to you about this right now. So you're kind of pulling that away.
Mhm.
I wonder if there's a way you can offer it back as long as the topic is different and you really give it to him, like even
Uh-huh.
more than you normally would,
Mhm. Okay, that's a
like
great idea.
dropping in with him. It's like, hey, we're not going to do the gift thing, but like, can we start the morning off with something that you really enjoy? Like pull out his craft or his Lego or his recent,
Mhm.
you know, area of interest. So what has been drawing
Yeah,
him in terms of things you might drop into alternatively?
yeah. I mean, TV, but we've also been trying to not have TV in the mornings at all. I kinda had, like, a strict,
Yeah.
like, not doing TV in the morning because it was getting in the way of many other things. But he has some, like, little figurines, and he's into, like, Matchbox cars, and, like, they do this whole thing at school now with Matchbox cars,
Oh,
so
cool. Yeah.
that usually works, but I think he's also it's like he's almost, like, trying to wear me down so that I'll give him TV because he knows if he wears me down, that's when TV comes out often.
Ah,
I'm trying not to do it, but I think he
mm.
has an association with, like, if mom gets too frustrated, she'll give up and turn on the TV.
Which is so relatable and, like, almost every solo parent and single parent I've spoken to has those moments, pretty
Mhm.
frequently. And so but if there's yeah, so that's a whole other topic for another day, like that piece exactly. But what I like here is that we're trying to get away from that and try to find an alternative to also TV,
Yeah.
potentially, right?
Mhm.
Here's a thought that came to me around, like, helping kids get kind of more grounded in the reality of how much they already have, is that
Mm,
he loves to be like a source of authority on the things that he really is interested in, right?
mm,
And so like like for example, he has this extensive helmet collection of things that he's created or things that he's created with with a costume designer that you like followed his interests. You're such an amazing mom like that. You're like, you like this? I'm going to find someone to do this with you and really go for it, like fully geek out. So I'm wondering about there would be some dopamine hits and some satisfaction of like saying, giving you a helmet tour, you
mm,
know? Like, I'd really love to see can you make a full display on the whatever, like it could be along the wall in the hallway. It doesn't have to be like on a table that you cleared off. That's more work, but just somewhere that's already like a linear space. Can you give me a full display of all your helmets and like walk me through it? I really need a tour.
mhm,
And
okay,
I mean, something that's just like high interest and really
mhm,
puts him in that seat of like, "Ooh, I have something to contribute." I'm because right
right,
now the like, gimme the stimulation versus I can generate my own stimulation is one of the switches we want too.
mm, okay, love that, okay,
Okay. So there's just like a more tangible prospect, but I would be looking out for opportunities like that.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, so now we're going to talk about your piece. And I think you're already circling around a pretty solid position on this, but let's get even more clear. I'm going to walk you through the limit setting piece because we know how much that works and how much it helps. So, why does this limit exist? And we're going to try to put it in the what you do want terms as much as possible. But if we need to start with what you don't want, we start there. And
mhm.
let's land in the what you do want.
What I don't want is a bunch of incessant questions that are the same question. Like, even though I said no or not going to talk about this now, like I've said something that's like a boundary that he continues to ask over and over and over again. And I don't want the focus on what he wants as opposed to what he has.
Yeah. So, more focus on what he has versus what he doesn't have. Would
Hmm.
be like I'm thinking like we're up here in the wrong, but like maybe middle, more focus. Right, more focus on what he has versus what he doesn't have. I'm also hearing something about not having to ask him to stop so many times. So like
Yeah.
respecting your request when you ask to change the topic and move on. So what you're asking for is that you focus more on what you have versus what you do have, and that when you make a request that we move on and talk about something else, he respects that request and finds a way to get on board with it.
Hmm.
Okay. And why does this request or limit boundary exist? And we're going to talk about it on a few levels. Like, how does it serve him and how does it serve like other goals? Right. So maybe we'll start with other goals. Like, what do we get to have or create, like, in terms of like an environment or a relationship or an experience? when we go
Right.
toward this direction where he's respecting your request and he's focusing more on what he does have? What's the benefit of
I mean, more
that?
connection, right? Because I'm not more connection because I'm not getting frustrated around
Yeah.
like,
Parent who
rather
wants to talk to
than
you versus parent who's
like,
annoyed and
"Had my
wanting
cup."
yeah, got the hand up. Yeah, okay, got it. Yeah. Right, so more connection. Lovely. I mean, what a worthy outcome. Anything
Yes.
else?
I mean, like, mutually satisfying conversations, which is still connection. Respect, like a feeling of respect. I mean, in the world, it's like a really good skill to have in the world, like, if you aren't paying attention to, like, someone saying, "I don't wanna have this conversation."
That's right. There it is. Yeah. That's to me like the deeper why is like so what I often coach folks to do, and you've heard me you've done this so well so many times, is what would be a reasonable response from the environment so that when they're out into the other environment where they're not it's not the person who loves them unconditionally, but it's just like
Mhm,
friends, the public, whatever. So they're prepared for situations, right? So
mhm,
how can I give them at least a dose of reality or like a reasonable response so that he can learn how to modulate, how to
mhm,
consider his impact, how to be respectful, right? So it's just setting him up for success in life. So we just went big, right? And deep,
right,
a deep desire you have. It's a piece of that puzzle, and that's significant. So
yeah,
worthwhile standing firm on. Mhm. Okay, so it's really it's for your relationship because that's the connection piece, and it's for him to learn and prepare for life. And when we do that part of the exercise, Sarah, I've noticed this has had an impact on you in the past, but I think sometimes in the moment we have to actually remind ourselves why we're holding our line and like why we're setting our standards the way we do to make sure that we like it's much easier sometimes to follow through when we have like really solid ground to stand on. Like this is good for him, this is good for us.
mhm, mhm,
Yeah. So I'm going to stay steady here.
mhm,
And it also helps to neutralize it a little bit because and here's why. If there's a greater purpose to this limit setting, this boundary, then it becomes less personal to you. It's not like I'm defending my right for respect right now,
mhm,
which you
mhm,
are, but you're
right,
also trying to build a healthy relationship, a good relationship with him. And
right,
you're also trying to help him learn and be prepared for the world. And I think when we delocalize our reason and we make it broader,
mhm,
it allows us to be less emotionally charged around it too.
right, yeah, can feel that, mhm,
Because it's like, it's not like this is for me. It's kind of like this is for the greater good. And like
right,
we gotta get on board with this together. Like this is our project, our goal together. We're gonna move towards because he wants to have a good relationship with you and he wants to be prepared for the world. He just doesn't realize that they're connected. And he may not. But you do. You do. Right. Okay. So we've checked that through. Now what can it sound like and look like if he doesn't follow through on this expectation? That's the third step. When he does, let's do green light first, right? Like green zone. When he
Yeah,
does take the feedback and changes the subject, let's just play that one through, and like allows you to change the subject or moves on from it without pushing and poking.
mm,
What could your response be or the response from the environment be to really reinforce that green zone? Like that he's in the go, like, yes, we love this. This is really helpful and healthy.
I mean, I guess take like, being really present for the conversation that different conversation or for whatever activity that we're kinda shifting to, rather
Yeah.
than feeling like I'm multitasking and don't really have time for that either, which is what I feel like my
Yeah.
condition is, like, I really
Yeah.
have to have a bunch of conversations right now,
So
but
let's
if
specify this in a la Coach Imani, her safe goals as his specificity. So let's actually talk about so be present. Maybe we could give it like drop in with him for 2 to 5 minutes
mhm, yeah,
and give him like a high quality contact with you.
mhm, yeah,
How does that
yeah,
I think there's the showing him that, but there's also a way you can tell him and
mhm,
say, when you respect my request or when we move on, it
mhm,
makes me want to stick around and really connect with you and spend some good time with you before we start our day. And you can
yeah,
already hear the or coming next, but like let's just stay with that for a moment.
mhm, mhm,
The other thing it can do is it can be like, I would imagine, and this is for anybody who is really trying to barrel over your needs and say, demand something from you. and maybe it is a reasonable thing they want or something that you're willing to do at some point. I imagine part 2 of that could be, and we can schedule a time to really sit down and look at your list and see what you're interested in for Christmas, and, like, and you can make a date with him, would be
Mhm.
my
Right.
concrete suggestion that he can probably hang on to a little better.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
you gotta, like, make good on it, right? Like, if it's Saturday morning, then first thing he wakes up, "It's Saturday, I guess," and you're just like, "You know what? I'm not gonna react. This is what we planned. This is what we agreed on. This is my kinda compromise. We're not here yet, or he's not gift obsessed or focused, but we're at least climbing
Uh-huh.
the ladder of that progress."
Mhm.
How's that sound for the do want?
Yeah.
if he does.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fair.
Now
Yeah.
we always should talk through the if he doesn't,
Mhm.
know, and perhaps it could be somewhat the opposite, which is like the closed bathroom door when if he continues to hit you, kind of analogy, right? A kind of metaphor of pulling from the past. It was like, I'm going to let you know that I'm definitely not having this conversation now, and I'm gonna walk away and move on to do other things. So I wonder about making that piece or the follow-up and saying like, so it's back to choices, right? If you're ready on the other side of the bathroom door, the door opens. If you're able to move on from this topic right now, we can drop in and like we can hang out for a little while, or I'll need to take some space and go do something else until you're ready to talk to me about something different. Yeah,
Yeah. No, that's
yeah, and it's that pre gaming with him, and
uh-huh.
in the moment reminding him, not assuming he will remember, but just like, oh right, you said. Yeah, so if I keep going on, like, you're gonna move away. I'm gonna, not have that attention from you anymore. Okay. And then the other one is, hey, bud, I'm more than willing to set an appointment with you where we get to go over all your wish list, and you can show me I can even help you research a bit. That can even happen as soon as Saturday morning. But what I need from you right now is for us to like find a way to move on in order to set that appointment. Otherwise, I can't really set that with you.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's not like, "You better or else," it's just sort of, "This is the plan." Like, I like to say it is the same way you would say, like, "Pass the salt." Like, it's just,
Mhm.
"This is salty," or "This is sweet," like, just a fact. Like,
Right.
"Here's how it is." Like, "This is what will happen." Mhm.
Yeah.
If you do and if you don't.
That's the practice.
You like so how do
I
you like our draft
like
of
it. Yeah,
this?
it's
Yeah? Okay. And it
yes.
feels like it's in service of your goals with this one?
Yes, totally.
Excellent. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So there, for those of you listening, there's a little example of how we might work through, something that's come up, and we're going to borrow on past successes. We're going to bring in maybe some refinement, some new language, recontextualize it, in like healthy relationships and growth and boundaries and scaffolding and the things, green light, the things that Sarah and I have worked with. We can now just reference them because of our extensive work we've done together. So we all got to get a little peek into that, what it feels like. Sarah, how are you feeling about this particular issue? Like, just give me a
Good.
read.
Good. Yeah, I think it'll be really helpful. I think
Okay.
there's a couple really big nuggets in there that are gonna be I mean, the whole plan is great, but I feel like the
Yeah.
finding the like, something else that he can like, the thing which he loved the thing you pointed out, like, him being an authority and sort of educating others on things that he loves as a source of, like, a dopamine hit. I feel like that is, like, a huge shift in my mind about how to satisfy that, and I think that could be a really good and it satisfies so many things because of the connection and etcetera.
Yeah. And it's like also hats off to him of like knowing you well enough to know exactly how to get you
Yeah, that's his
wrapped
superpower.
around what he wants right now and in his
I mean,
world and
his
paying
superpower
attention,
is
you know?
how to trigger me, I swear to God, but
I said,
I
well,
know,
can't
it's
you
not just
are? They're pretty talented at it. I mean, they pay attention, and I think part of it is that dopamine hit, but it's also partly like wanting to get something that feels like, it's nurturing some need around attention and power and, you know,
Mhm,
so if we give them other ways, like, that are more preferable, and eventually they really do choose the better path over time.
mhm,
And you've seen that because he's no longer physical with you, right? And you're able to kind of shift through difficult moments, in a different way than you ever could. You can inspire him to be, what did I call him when I saw him? A gracious host. He likes to rise to the occasion of these different ways of identifying. And I think You can even edify him. What a smart choice you made this morning, or like what a wise call. Yeah. Now we get to enjoy the morning. I really like your choice.
Sorry.
So it's just to wrap up, and this is something I'm going to ask all my guests who have, who are parents and have worked in the work. We take a bold stand at raising our resilience that parents deserve mentorship too. Not just, I mean, there's so much for programming for kids. I mean, you go out there and say kids programming for any topic, and you'll have 1,000 options, right? And teachers, if you're in the teaching world, you realize there are a lot of options. We have colleges with degrees and 1-year programs and all kinds of things for teachers. And to me, parents can be left out of that, especially like the more formal sort of like structured programs. But now it's the parents' turn, and that's what we do, right? We work with the parents, and we give them some of the same tools and insights that we would, teachers going out into the field with kids. So I want to know from your perspective, Sarah, having working with families yourself, and also having been in the community now for about 3 years, what about this makes sense to you, and how do you feel about parents getting the help they need? Like, what would you add to that kind of bold stand about parents deserve this? Love to bring your voice into it, and we'll close.
I mean, I think it's a really different than reading books. Like, I was reading all the right books, and it was not working. That's sort of the tailored insight into, like, a specific situation, because I feel like there's so many different ways that a scenario could be approached. I mean, I think just you don't need to do it alone, right? Like, we just think we're, like, these islands that have to do it on our own, and that you should have all the insight. And I think it can feel very overwhelming, and I think there's friends out there who are, like, willing to give you, like, advice, but then I think your initial instinct is to sort of be like, "Ah, don't," I'm not asking for advice, I just want you to listen." So going into a space where you're, like, actually, like, intending to get that and, like, open, it helps a lot, because I feel like, we just I don't know, it's just hard to hear it from friends sometimes when you're like, "I don't know that you're really an expert." But yeah, I just think having your team, I feel like there's too much to do, and you can't hold all the balls. Yeah, I have a therapist, I have you, I have, so many different people now, and I feel like it just makes me feel like I can, like you said, kind of let go a little bit and, like, trust that I have the
Yeah.
right tool for the job.
And what I've seen is that unwinding that we talked about, that sinking in to the support, actually makes you more effective in the goals that you're setting anyway, or the wish, the heart's desire that you want to create. So not only are the functional parts of the mentorship and the support really helpful, but I think the effect it has on you makes those things even more possible. So yeah, appreciate your perspective, Sarah. Thank you for sharing it with us, and thank you for your time. And I know you're right in the middle of being with your
Baby's
son who's
homesick,
homesick
sorry.
today. Yeah, yeah, and just like keeping his commitment just means a lot, and we're really we've really benefited from your sharing today. And thank you so much. So proud
Same.
of you. Yeah.
Yeah, pleasure. It's always nice to connect.
As we wrap up, remember, there's no one size fits all way to parent. Keep nurturing those strong family bonds and watch resilience bloom in your community. You've got this. And if you found this episode valuable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can also hop over to thecalmempoweredparent.com for current events and to grab your copy of the Calm Parent Strategy Guide. You can even learn how to bring our free and low-cost workshops to your school or community. Your support means the world to us and helps us empower more parents and children. Let's do this together.